within the collective psyche, we hold an imprint of abandonment, and it is this abandonment imprint that shapes a lot of the human experience's subconscious landscape, as well as our emotional landscape and emotional intelligence. So today I'm going to be talking about the cosmic abandonment that is stored as an imprint within our body-mind-spirit complex. In my video, The Cosmic Role of the Inner Child, I talk about how the archetype of the inner child stores within it microcosm information that is reflecting a macrocosm theme happening within the cosmos. And that is one that strongly has to do with abandonment. Well, to further elaborate on this cosmic abandonment, what's being played out in our microcosm worlds, meaning our everyday lives as individuals that are also a part of a larger reflection happening within the universe, is that innately there is a traumatic experience being perceived, not just through the act of birth and through life, but through what birth represents. Have we ever thought about why birth has to be in the form that it is? It's traumatic inherently to be born into existence. And that is what birth is a fractal representation of. It's the sound and the fury and the trauma of being in an undifferentiated state into an individual differentiated experience and state of being. This narrative of an undifferentiated state, individualizing, and then differentiating into a physical experience is most well encompassed through the popular mythology of the fall, where literally a consciousness falls into a lower vibratory state of being, and through that fall in consciousness experiences separation consciousness, where it's a separate being, an individualized ego that is now in a physical realm where one has to learn right from wrong, where one has to learn up from down. Essentially, they are now responsible for their own knowledge. And so it is a realm that consists of knowing, whereas their natural state of being was an undifferentiated state of not knowing and not needing to have the facilitation of knowledge. There's always at least a grain of truth embedded within our mythology, if not way more than just a grain of truth, because mythology is a literary device that's meant to encapsulate and store our soul's journey within it, even when we've lost complete contact with that memory. And so it's carried out and told through myth, and these are most relevant to us when we're looking at them at the soul level, as being seen as archetypal expressions within the universe. So mythology is always referring to archetypal themes and the archetypes that are being played out within the soul and the psyche. And the soul is the one that is experiencing itself as these archetypes. And however strongly a myth has been preserved and significant to the collective psyche is showing how relevant that mythology is to the soul's journey. So this theme of one way or another, there being a fall from grace into a lower state of consciousness, can be interpreted as being outcasted. It can be interpreted as being banished. It can be interpreted as choosing evil. It can be interpreted as us going from a state of nascence into a state of ignorance. Both of these two states are one of not knowing, but in nascence, there is more innocence, mercy, and forgiveness attached to the state of nascence than there is with ignorance. And so you have this creation myth that is extraordinarily popular in this realm to our collective psyche, but then we also have more contemporary versions of creation myth that are also just as relevant to the collective psyche as well. And that would be mainly the creation myths revolving our human species being the children of extraterrestrial forces that created us. For a large amount of conscious individuals within this age, there is a central theme of extraterrestrial forces that have created us and then abandoned us. And this is also where the origins of our abandonment imprint have come from. according to this creation mythology. Now, it is very important to note here that the human body, as it presents itself to us today genetically, has been extraordinarily tampered with by outside forces. However, we have confused the experimental nature of higher dimensional beings and the interference that has been involved within our own biology, within our own species, within our own consciousness, and within our whole evolutionary journey, really. All of it has been interfered with. And yet, none of this actually points back to the origins of our species holding this abandonment imprint from higher dimensional beings, be they extraterrestrial or interdimensional. This creation myth has strong roots in the thought form of these extraterrestrial races. So it's actually a thought form being projected and emanating from them. Some off-planet forces would love nothing more than for us to believe that they created us, because what that does in our body, mind, spirit is actually formulate that paradigm and that reality, and then it reflects within the biology to continue staying within that realm where they had created us, and that we are not in fact source, incarnate, both the creator and the creation. They would love for us to disconnect from the truth of us being source and have us instead be demoted to a science project, an experiment that we are at the whims of, and that we were used in one form or another merely just to mine very important precious metals and resources from the earth from, and nothing more. Even some depict us as a slave race. All of these different mythologies were embedded into our collective psyche with a grain of truth, but also the higher origins of them cut off in order for us to be molded into that paradigm that continues that biological tampering. So we have a few different ways to look at this abandonment. We could even continue. We could go further and view it as us being disconnected from our higher self, because being in the lower realms for as long as we have on the soul's journey through the lower densities creates a lot of trauma within those experiences, and the more trauma that we are experiencing, the more soul loss innately comes with it. And at the very core of this celestial theme of abandonment that is deeply embedded within the human species and the human mind, you have soul loss. It is soul loss that has severed our remembrance and severed our being into the degree of abandonment from its own self, from its wholeness and its holiness. In my video, What is Soul Loss?, I explain the mechanics of what soul loss is, as well as the ways that it is experienced within the world and some of its symptoms. However, abandonment is the primary symptom of soul loss. It is the first and foremost place from which all the other symptoms of soul loss stack up to from there. So it is so central to the theme of trauma and to the theme of disassociation from our higher aspects, from our higher knowing, from the totality of our consciousness, that you could even look at all of the other symptoms of soul loss still stemming from that core wound of abandonment. We can see this root cause of abandonment in our everyday lives whenever we track our limiting beliefs and our belief systems back to their origins. We can see it play out in both our relationships and in our work, because both of these areas are core to our survivalism. But this wound is most activated when it comes to why we continue to accept and allow very distorted and pathological forms of authority to keep manifesting into our collective experience. If we were to look within and even apply this abandonment wound to why humanity is attracted to the world leaders and the systems that they are attracted to, we would find that the reason we have low standards is because we are projecting onto our entire world the parental figures that we want to protect us from feeling abandoned. So we have different metaphysical layers of reality that are all contributing to this abandonment wound, since the different layers of creation mythology are still conveying attributes of what happened to cause us in a state of soul loss. So they're not opposed to one another, but you could look at it as different paradigms or different layers of reality contributing their piece of the puzzle, the truth contained within that aspect of reality, into this larger theme of abandonment that we're experiencing, not just from any one layer of reality. And this all can be rectified through the archetype of the inner child, because the inner child is the one that stores all of this information that's happening at a macrocosmic level within the cosmos, within it, simply because we came into this life through the birthing process. Birth is extraordinarily traumatic, and we carry that memory within the inner child, and then all of the other experiences from that point of birth on. So if the act of birth in and of itself is telling us, hey, being alive is traumatic, then what it's being shown or reflected to us from the macrocosm, from the greater multiverse, is it's showing to us that to be conscious is going through a very devastating experience from the state that it once was in. The birth process would not need to be so freaking intense if it wasn't trying to communicate to us something, if it wasn't trying to show us that, hey, coming into physicality or even just becoming conscious, choosing life is very intense and traumatic. So this is inherently expressing that separation consciousness to individuate is experienced on some deeper level as abandonment, even though there's lots of rewards and fruits for it as well. But that there is this innate abandonment within creation that comes from the act of disconnecting from our own wholeness, that then gets echoed through our creation mythology, through there being a fall from a higher state of being into a lower state of being. And when we don't have right relationship with that, we start to depict the fall into there being some sort of evil that's implicated into it, even though really we have entered the realm of polarity. And then as well carried over with there being extraterrestrial mythology of them being our parents or our true creators, because they have been able to tamper so thoroughly with our own biological form. Right relationship with myth is when we look at mythology through the lens of it always telling us something vital about our unconscious. The different characters within myth are either depicting archetypes, natural forces, or the activity and characteristics within different stages of consciousness, such as activity when consciousness is in the state of a golden age, versus activity when consciousness is descended into a state of a dark age. Myth is how we communicate with the collective unconscious, and the collective unconscious speaks to us through the language of myth. The collective unconscious is the metastructure, or the architecture of the psyche. Knowing this is how we develop right relationship with myth, so that we are not taking it in its exoteric, base, and most literal form. From this perspective, we can see that the original process of splitting, or bifurcation, that takes place from the act of creating is what causes our abandonment trauma, and from that same space, we also are set off on a quest of self-discovery. This can either be depicted in our myth as deviant or as adventurous, as defiant or as heroic, which is why even myth is in a state of growing and maturing. So all of these different layers of reality that contribute to this core theme of abandonment, and that also we end up interpreting this whole theme through, can actually be rectified through the inner child, which is why inner child healing is so prominent in the spirit of this age. It's because as a fractal, as a microcosm unit of the all, we can heal the inner child, and by doing so, reclaim aspects of our energy field that are not even in this earth experience right now, that are in past lives, that are in future lives, that are in parallel lives. This is the story arc that we are on, both in this universe and within the soul's journey. It's being able to integrate all of the different ways that the theme of abandonment has shown up within our own personal lives, or even within the sensory field of our energy field, because many of us feel a strong sense of abandonment that are coming from another layer of reality that we have experienced, but that we just don't have the memory or the reference point for. So that can be way more vague. It could even be a planet that we considered home being destroyed or blown up, or some sort of travesty or devastation happening to it. There's a lot of different ways that abandonment has played out in our own soul's journey. However, healing is so prominent because healing involves integrating. And when we are integrating, we are healing that abandonment wound. And by doing so, that unites us with our own totality and our own wholeness. I hope this has helped unify your consciousness. Make sure to subscribe to my channel for higher dimensional guidance through spiritual awakenings. See you next time.